Hi, I'm Steve McIntosh, president and co-founder of the Institute for Cultural Evolution think tank, which is working on evolving American politics. And a good friend of mine and fellow of our think tank is with me today to talk about Web 3.0, blockchain, and the implications for cultural evolution that goes with that. Gary's quite an expert at this, and so I'm very much looking forward to learning from him about this important emerging, technological domain. Gary is the COO and co-founder of Civics Unplugged, which is a very prominent and successful nonprofit based in New York City that's really helping Gen Z young people step up and fulfill their role as contributors to the society and good civic actors. Gary has also been recognized by Forbes as one of the 30 under 30 to watch. He's extremely brilliant, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation.
Extremely brilliant. Definitely overselling me, Steve, but I really appreciate you having me on here.
Thanks, Gary. It's a pleasure to be with you. So tell us, let me just go ahead and ask, you are excited about the emergence of what I think many viewers would understand as by the term blockchain, the technology that allows for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And that has recently led to non-fungible tokens. I mean, I apologize for being very uninformed about this area of the economy and the technosphere, but my intuition is that there are large implications for cultural evolution and for solving the problems of society. And so I'd love to know the initial impetus that led to you suggesting this as a discussion topic.
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me give some background. Let me give some background on where I was when it was 2015, let's say, when I was just graduating from Duke University. I just got a full-time job at Google in New York City. I kind of had two priorities. Number one was go to and host fun parties. The other one was to get promoted at Google, and turned out I was very prolific at both. And then Trump got elected, and I realized there was a lot more instability in our culture and our politics. And I did a bit of online activism stuff in a very more like cliche sort of ideological way. After about a year of doing that, I realized that was not the way to go for a variety of reasons. Then I discovered your work, Steve, among other thinkers, but I was really impressed by the way that you were thinking about things. And I was like, it helped me see like how I was trapped in the sort of ideological bubble, pushing a sort of mimetic tribe like ideas without even knowing it. Also kind of realized just how broken our democratic systems are, or maybe designed in a way that's disempowering for ordinary people. And so I guess I was also just overall just thinking about how was I in ways contributing to the polarization, at least not contributing to the evolution. And so I wanted to contribute to the evolution. So in mid 2019, I broke the golden handcuffs. I left Google and decided to work on democracy full time by empowering Gen Z, which is a generation that's like mostly between like 13 and like 25 right now. Very potent, high potential generation for impact, but potential is not reality. So how do you ensure that Gen Z is a developmentally evolved generation so that it can help evolve our culture, our systems? Civics Unplugged has been doing that for the last 3 years. And about about 2.5 years ago, I met where I was at when it comes to, or no, not 2.5 years ago, about 7 months ago, I was where I've been for a while, which is crypto is mostly just a scam sort of space, where there's all this talk of revolution, etc., but mostly just get rich quick type stuff. It's just greater fool's games, if not Ponzi schemes. And then in short, I was introduced to one of the co-founders of this Web3 organization called Gitcoin with a G, that is really focused on funding and building public goods, which was like, that's like not at all what I expected from a crypto Web3 organization. And they encouraged me to think about, okay, you're having all this success training young leaders outside of the Web3 world. Kind of trust me, Gary, there's something here in Web3 that there's a culture forming, and there's also like sets of tools that are really relevant to systems change. And I would say overall, I've been proven that sort of thesis has been increasingly proven correct to me. And just to compare my own mood about the future from August of 2021 to today, which is May 2022, I feel a lot more optimistic about the future, feel a lot better about Web3 or what it can be. And so I'm love to just dive into why I believe that.
Yeah, please go on.
So there's a lot to say about the technology, but let me start with the culture, because I think for whatever reason, the Web3 world is becoming this sort of gravitational force for people that were really burnt by the old world, the status quo world, super hierarchical, often meaningless jobs. Often if they're involved in change making work, they realize a lot of what I realized, which is it's not obvious if you're net positive. How many people in politics you can for sure say they are definitely good for the long-term health of American culture and society? It's not.
They're caught up as gears, in this larger dysfunctional system. So in some ways, they don't have enough power to prevent themselves from
being sucked in and being part of the problem. But also, like, my peers, we fought to secure McKinsey internships and jobs, BCG, Goldman Sachs, big tech, Meta, right? We fought to get these jobs, which also not very obvious if that was a net positive in society. And so put aside the blockchain technology, you have this gravitational force of people my age, right? And they're, mid, late 20s, sometimes a lot younger, early 30s, that are just like, and people of all ages really, that are just like burnt out from this old world and are ready to evolve, like as individuals, but also society. So that's something that you spend any time like talking to people at Web3 events, which it's not a perfect distinction, right? But there's like sort of like a distinction that's being made of like crypto events and like culture and Web3 culture. And even if you want to make a further distinction, there's like regenerative Web3 culture, if you want to be really distinct, where there's people that truly want to figure out how to use technology and connect with people in a way that, and work with people in a way that that is a great improvement on how we have previously dealt with and regenerated soil, natural ecosystems like marine life and rainforests, democracies, regenerating like our faith in humanity. There's a lot of people that are just really, really concerned with these things and are very open-minded and optimistic about being able to use and build new technologies that can reverse humanity's downward spiral.
So would you say, I mean, I did read up a little bit on this, but I'm still far from understanding it, in any kind of thoroughgoing way. But one of the things that struck me about why it's being called Web 3.0, right, is that Web 1.0 was read only, right? Web 2.0 was read and write, and Web 3.0 is read, write, and own. That there's this distributed ownership that at least, it points to, from my naive understanding, a kind of a glimmer of a new economic system of distributed ownership that is like, employee stock ownership on steroids. Or would you not agree with that?
I think it's an interesting framework. I think the read, write, own framework is an interesting one. It's a provocative one. I don't know how it's a framework, just like all frameworks that are imperfect, sometimes helpful. A framework that I threw out into the world a few weeks ago was the fact that Web 1 might have been create, like blogs and emails, etc. Web 2 was create and connect, right? So social media as well. And then Web 3 was create, connect, and cultivate. And what I mean by cultivate is make it easier to create communities, ecosystems, create tools that regenerate the things that we care about. And I think this obsession over ownership I think ownership has a lot to do with feeling empowered and agentic, but that's not like the point. The point is that we're cultivating ourselves and the communities that we care about, and democracies and natural ecosystems, et cetera. And the technologies that are emerging and the culture that's emerging in Web3 is super potent for cultivating what matters, incentivizing the cultivation of what matters as well. And
okay, well, let me press you on that. So right now, just to make it as non-technological an example as I can, right? So we have our think tank that you're a part of. It's a nonprofit organization. We want to distribute ownership and work with consensus, but still have a growth hierarchy within it. Within our entrepreneurial space of flexibility, we can do a lot of things with this organization in terms of design and innovation. There's nothing about any specific technology that constrains us from doing that, or maybe there is that I can't see. But I guess I'm hoping you can explain to me what it is about the technological aspect, the fact that it's a new iteration of the internet that opens up these new avenues for organization that don't exist, in the kind of more analog universe, that I live in.
It's a great question. I think this is actually one of the first times I'm articulating this, at least on camera, which is digital communities have been forming for a while, right? Ever since maybe the dawn of the internet. And you could argue that people emailing each other was like beginning to form a sort of sense of community and people that follow blogs, et cetera. But I think, well, Web3, just for communities, what's done is it's made it a lot easier to structure financings and funding flows and decision-making schemes and power in a more concrete, trackable way. So here's one example relating to funding. For DreamDAO, which is basically just a digital community within Civics Unplugged, which is a larger community, we raised money and identified like older people that wanted to support our kids by selling NFTs for 0.1 Ethereum, which at the time was like $400. And that's nice because let's talk about why it's nice for different parties. For the person buying the NFT, it's like there's proof that you cared about this cause, the kids and the community enough to buy this thing, where there's proof also on chain that's unerasable that you spent this much money to support this cause. And also, if you want, it came with a picture, which allowed you to put on your Twitter picture or just in your wallet. That's like, hey, like I basically have a merit badge that says I cared enough about this community. That's actually really valuable. Just like this record of merit, record of me caring about this community. It's actually a very simple mechanism, right? But it's very, very powerful because people really want to belong. People really want to signal what they think is valuable. Right now, social impact is becoming increasingly more valuable. Web3 itself is becoming more and more valuable. So like people also want to be associated with Web3 things. But so it's kind of this like win-win in many ways. For the organization, we never are able to forget who supported us. Like it's easy for us to like just lose track of our donor logs, but sure, like you have this like permanent memento unless you transfer it away that you care about this community and you want to be part of this community. Also, if you don't want to be part of this community, you can resell it and potentially make your money back, if not more.
I see. That's an interesting feature. I mean, I'm trying to bring it down to earth where I can understand it. For example, this in our nonprofit, one of the things I implemented a couple of years ago was a certificate of membership. And that if you made a donation of, I think it was $15 or more, then we'd send you a nice PDF, a digital certificate, which you could either, print out if you were into it, or just kind of have as a
Sure,
token of your support.
Okay.
It's certainly not resellable or as kind of tangible a digital asset as an NFT. But beyond this sort of symbolic form, is there any concern that the people who own your NFTs, are they like stockholders? Do they start to become empowered in ways that are beyond symbolic?
So I'm not an expert in law in any way, but these do not represent ownership in the way that stocks represent ownership. But most people don't need to feel like they own a part of something like legal in a legal way. Like if having this NFT allows you to participate in decision making in the community that you care about, that's all you really care about, right? Like you don't need to say that I'm technically a percent owner of this organization according to securities law. But yeah, the resale value of it allows for this kind of default, accountability for the person kind of running the community, because people can exit from the community whenever they want. So if I had a community, I wanted Steve to stay and not just like out by selling his membership token, I want to actually create a community that's worth staying, that's more valuable than the resale value of the membership token.
I see. So in the ownership part, it makes it, I mean, at least correct me if I'm wrong, but it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to make a donation of $15 and get a gimmicky certificate. It's another thing to have an NFT because it's more, even though it's still digital, it has a tangibility to it, and it's sort of, it's a little bit like a share of stock or a dollar bill or something.
For sure.
I'm just curious as to the very fact of the novelty of it. Once the novelty of it wears off, and every artist or every organization, wants to help spread the ownership of their art or their organization through NFTs. I'm just trying to uncover the underlying value that makes it superior to these older pre-blockchain.
Well, I think we talked about it. You're
Okay.
not reselling your PDF, and there's ways to program your organization such that having the NFT gives you governance rights. It gives you access to certain community spaces, right? You might need to show your NFT and get into an in-person event, right? Like the thing about having like a trustable digital certificate of membership that the whole blockchain network trusts as like a real thing is that you can write whatever sort of logic, you can provide whatever privileges you want, right, that are associated with owning that thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. That sounds attractive. It's something that, just having this conversation with you, I'm excited to pursue the possibility of using NFTs to help fund our think tank.
For sure. And I think the key is to use an NFT platform system that enables people, for example, to buy it with a credit card, for example, just so that it's a net positive and not a net negative, right, for the community. And these are all things that you need to think through. I think a lot of the first communities that are leveraging NFTs for fundraising and membership are all like, mostly people that are super tech forward, and like right now, the adoption curve of like tech, like we're on this very early part of the adoption curve. But I would say I'd be happy to help you explore potential options for something like this. I think there's so much tooling that's being built out right now,
Right.
that makes this sort of technology a lot more accessible. So it is an exciting time. And just to kind of full circle address your point about, outside of the novelty and hype and glimmer, the underlying value is this digital asset that you can program privileges into.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and even if no one wants, even if you disable the ability for it to be resold, right? And that's often called non-transferable NFTs. You still have the value. You know what I mean? Like
sure.
it doesn't have to be about a speculative thing, right? It can be like, yeah, like I show up to this community in-person space, and like at the doors is this like NFT reader. It's like, great, like now I can get into this building. Right.
So it lives on your phone like an app or a file that you can just show. Yeah. And that's, I'm starting to get a sense of why this is exciting. Let me ask you, have you thought much about the larger implications for cultural evolution as this, more than just as a novel funding mechanism, but as a way of building out civil society in ways that are not currently as easy to do without this technology?
Yeah. So outside of NFTs are interesting, and they can be leveraged in interesting ways. DAOs, which stand for Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, are a really big thing in Web3 now. To put it simply, it's a digital first community that leverages blockchain in some way to better enable the community to function and achieve its goals. And so one idea that I've had that I'm tossing around with some local community partners in Chicago, I'm based in New York City, but I have a lot of friends in Chicago, is helping, like, let's say inner city kids like form and join these like communities that people can donate money into, and then they can democratically manage this pool of funds to improve their neighborhoods. So okay, to take a step back, in order to evolve our democracy, it's not just about a matter of voting, right? It's a matter of like a whole civic renaissance where people all over the country, and ultimately we're such a connected world that if there's a civic renaissance in the US, probably the entire Western world, right? And community associations have basically died, like in the last 50 years, right? Bowling alone, right? That's, talked about extensively. And we need to, one of the reasons why I'm optimistic about the non-scam side of Web3 is that it's making community association cool again, right? To be a part of a group of people that is like democratically managing or managing in whatever like structured way that they want, a pool of funds, or just making decisions together, even if the funding is not a big deal, to achieve its collective goals.
So let me jump in here and say that you're probably aware of really the exciting connection about how you're talking about reviving civic society. And one of the favorite ideas of conservative intellectuals, this is this idea from Edmund Burke. He called the idea of little platoons, little small civic organizations like a Rotary Club or even a bowling club. And when Alexis de Tocqueville came and analyzed, the United States in the 1830s or 40s, and really one of the things he said that made American society unique and dynamic was how much citizens organized these little platoons and little civic organizations sort of spontaneously and automatically. They weren't imposed from the top down by the government. And that many conservative writers and maybe some liberal writers as well have pointed out the breakdown of civic society and how one of the legacies of the digital age is that it's isolated us more, it's atomized us more, and the opportunity to get together and have the incentive and the mechanisms and the certain amount of funding to create a positive localized civic group is by some analysis one of the cornerstones of democracy. So if that could be revived through this technology, then it really would have a big impact on cultural evolution.
Yeah, so right now what's happening in the Web3 world is, so there's two parts. There's this culture of collective like it's basically a culture of these platoons that you mentioned, right? Like seriously, I think that's what's happening in a kind of ferocity that I've like never seen before, because I've been in the democracy reform space for ever since I met you like 4 years ago, and the amount of excitement to just get together and like do shared things, right? Even in groups of like 5, or it could be 50, or some groups I'm part of 5,000. It's like cool. There's truly like a laboratory of experimentation happening, both from like just a primordial culture sense, like how do we relate to each other, how do we think about each other, but also bleeding edge technology, right? How do you create community empowerment tools, right, that enable us to manage a treasury together, onboard people to the community, offboard people, host community events. There's like an explosion of innovation happening to enable communities to do whatever they want to do.
So well, let me just then, in the decentralized organization, the DAO organization that you've created within Civics Unplugged, that uses this decentralized way of organizing folks, give me a sense of how that feels, what that's like. How is that different, from participating in a more normal kind of organization?
So I'm not sure what normal means, but I think I like the term DAO because it forces you to think about what can you decentralize responsibly. I think most things for an early community need to be centralized, because there's like hundreds of decisions that need to be made, like every week sometimes, right?
Well, the
And like,
people who are closest to it are sometimes better at making those decisions than the
sure, high
broad crowd
context,
may not be as
like,
informed.
not everyone should be making decisions, right? It's funny that this needs to be explained, but like, not structure is good. Hierarchy, depending on how you define it, can be good, etc. Like, and certainly clarity around how the organization works is just so key, right, for everyone to function in it and know how to like advance or take on more responsibility. But the DAO name, even though most organizations that call themselves DAO are not decentralized, really, they're not autonomous. They're like provocations to ask us, where can we decentralize? Like for some things where we're ready to trust people to take on this responsibility, how can we, shift power away from the center? What can we start to automate so that there's less bureaucracy? Right? That's kind of, for me, that is what kind of words serve to provoke me as like the leader of the Dream DAO. In practice, I think what is most useful in the acronym would be to consider it a democratic asynchronous organization.
Okay.
So ICE is any digital organization is very
The Institute for Cultural Evolution, right? We're not calling it ICE as much as we used to, but anyway, our think tank.
I understand why. Institute for Cultural Evolution is a very asynchronous sort of organization. There's definitely meetings, but like a lot happens through emails and just like people reading things on their own time.
But it's virtual, right? We all live in different places.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's like lots of learnings that are happening on how to manage and cultivate and almost like a garden, like these sort of organizations. Anyways, back to my specific example, we're still figuring it out. I think so. There's a lot of different things that we have, like almost like legislation, like proposals that people put out, and then like people review the draft of the proposal, they edit it, then we do a vote on it. We've done about 24 votes on proposals. It's not always clear what should be a proposal or just like kind of consented upon. I think we're actually developing processes to have a better protocol for what goes up to a vote. Like something that definitely goes up to a vote, for example, is a proposal that affects the treasury, right? Transfer money from point A to point B. That is something that we go up for a DAO vote. But everyone's just figuring this out, really.
Sure. No. I mean, it's new, and that's what it's the woolly wild west in a way, and yet I'm beginning to get a sense of why this is exciting and why it does open up new possibilities.
Yep.
Have you considered, or have you read anything talking about the potential downsides of this new way of organizing?
Not everything should be a community. I think there should be, like Amazon. For simplicity's sake, let's say Amazon was a good thing to create, right? Amazon would not be able to be created if it was a community that was creating it. It had to be sort of this benevolent dictator. And I don't think militaries should function like a community.
Sure.
I think it should be clear hierarchy, rigid processes. Like when you're reforming the rules of it, you got to be very careful, because even though there's issues, there's a reason why it worked, right? And
so I mean, I guess maybe one of the benefits of a decentralized autonomous organization is that it flattens hierarchy, right? Which has been the goal of a lot of other, like for example, holacracy as a management technique. One of its goals was to flatten hierarchy, and I know many people are still enthusiastic about it, but it obviously now has a track record of failure too, like companies like Zappos. So when it comes to flattening hierarchy, how are some of the critical functions of hierarchy, even in community organizations, how are those replicated in a decentralized autonomous organization? How do you decide somebody needs to call a vote, for example?
So I just got off the phone yesterday with the founder of this organization called Murm, which realized that for distributed organizations or digital distributed organizations like Institute for Cultural Evolution, it doesn't make sense for many reasons to have like this one giant like constitution that almost resembles like 1700s, rather than like an ecosystem of agreements where each agreement you went through a process of putting it out to the community, asking for input on it, and then people can basically help ratify that one sub agreement. So for example, there could be an agreement for what kind of members are we looking for. There could be an agreement for what is our mission or values, right? There could be an agreement for how we onboard people, right? Like if everything went into like this giant rigid rule book, right? Then it just doesn't make sense, right? Like you almost, where was I going with this?
Well, the functions of hierarchy, and how those are kind of bypassed, within a decentralized organization.
So running a decentralized organization is very, very difficult because no one is the same, right? And like the founders of a decentralized organization can have very different expectations of what is acceptable, right? And what just like life, right? Like they could just have different life philosophies, right? And so kind of why I'm bringing up Murmur, this app, this like website that I'm mentioning, which allows your organization to have like a process for agreeing on agreements, on ratifying agreements, is you can take almost nothing for granted about people's understanding of how things should be done, because everyone has a different idea of what a community is, what a DAO is, like how to achieve the mission. And so you have to do this extra work because people are just so used to hierarchy and just listening to their boss tell them what to do. If that's not how you want the organization to run, you have to be very clear on how else you want it to run, which requires you, here's the joke I like to make. In order to successfully run a DAO, which I don't know all the requirements of it because we've only been around for 4 months. We're surviving so far. But what I suspect you need to successfully run a DAO that survives more than like a year, let's say, is like a philosopher king or queen, a tech wizard, a spiritual guru, and a workaholic. Because it's very difficult to do this. You have to attend to like all these different members that all are going through life issues, and like they're all like confused on how to interact with other people because it's so different from the hierarchical environments that they're part of. Your organization is constantly adapting to the opportunities and needs from the outside world. So you have to be this like sense-making master that is very, very good at technology and really hardworking, and also is very good with people. Again, I'm not saying that I'm that person. I hope I am becoming that kind of person. And I hope that I can be someone that makes it easier for the next person to create a DAO that resembles our DAO in some kind of way in the future. Does that make sense? Like,
Sure. I mean, I'm following you. I mean, the big question that's rising in my mind, and again, these are naive questions, so pardon me, but so even a loose decentralized community is still kind of an organization, right? It's still we could still call it an organization. And we know that ideally an organization has a kind of a binding higher purpose or coherent set of higher purposes. And in a decentralized organization, the question would be, how do you keep, in a sense, insurgencies from toppling that higher purpose or from taking over if it's decentralized, if there's no sort of centralized, place where the torch of the higher purpose can be carried and maintained.
So, every organization decides how it wants to be governed, and whether it even has a system where like 51% or whatever percent of members can like change the fundamental, like some core things, let's say, about how the organization works. There's been plenty of like finance-oriented DAOs that have been hijacked by bad actors that don't care about the mission of that DAO, and they've
Sure, exactly. My question. Yeah.
They've drained the funds of the treasury, right? You know, you convince or you find a way to get 51% of the votes or whatever threshold is needed, and then you can just create a proposal that automatically executes that says drain all the funds and send them to scammers' wallet, right? Or like the thief's wallet, right?
Sure.
There's a whole world of thinking that's emerging on how to make your DAO anti-capturable. I'm not an expert in that, but it's funny. It's great that you bring that up as a concern, because it is.
I see some parallels. You know, for example, just looking over, you know, one of our board members is John Mackey, CEO of Whole Foods, and seeing how, you know, as a public company, Whole Foods was, in a sense, they didn't get taken over by the kind of insurgent firm that tried to do a kind of an acquisition.
Oh, really?
But because they were close to being taken over, they ultimately had to find what's known in the finance industry as a white knight. Amazon ended up buying Whole Foods, partially as a result of this.
Oh, I didn't know that.
JANA, which is the, you know, kind of insurgent stockholder activist finance firm. So I mean, in the world of business, right, the public companies have been traded, you know, that when you own a percentage of the stock. And I can imagine there's a lot of ways that that NFTs are disanalogous with shares of stock in a company. But of course, there's a large body of law that's developed around, you know, poison pills and anti-takeover measures and all that. I guess rather than getting into the weeds about those two comparisons, maybe a better question would be, do you think that these organizations can function sort of outside any kind of law or regulation, or do they need to be kind of contained within the legal framework that's provided by a nation state, for example?
I'm not an expert in understanding extra legal sort of matters. I know that there's DAOs that have no intent of filing any sort of paperwork with any government, but it's not a type of DAO that I'm associated with or support.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, like you said, it's just beginning. And so the implications of where it's going to go have yet to be worked out by all of us.
Yeah. But I think the future of DAOs really depends on a lot of it depends on sensible regulation that treats, like, I'm not going to say I know what good means, or good means, but like that enable good DAOs to exist, right? And these are challenging questions to wrestle with on what good is and what kind of regulation would enable good DAOs to exist. But they need to be asked a lot more. There needs to be a lot more curiosity from policymakers who, not their fault, probably have zero exposure to a lot of what we've been talking about today. And that's actually something that I'm trying to work on. I want to work on more storytelling around the positive aspects of this technology and the space.
So for somebody, you know, like me, who's just read about NFTs in the New York Times and seen you know, what journalists like to point to as some crazy cartoon character that sold for, you know, millions of dollars, and why would anybody want a piece of that kind of thing? I'm interested to just go online and look at a website that is highlighting a DAO or an NFT offering. Are there some sort of standout examples you could point to that people could investigate to get a little bit more concrete sense of what this offering is?
Sorry, I know it's muted. Yeah, I would look into DreamDAO, not to, like, you know, just promote your own thing.
No, I'm interested in that. I want to check out DreamDAO. How do I do that?
Go to dreamdao.xyz. That's our website. You'll see a link to documentation that will help you understand the philosophy behind this. There's an emerging like type of DAO that is impact DAO, which is what Dream DAO falls under. Just DAOs that are meant to make impact on the world, positive impact on the world. And Dream DAO was one of the first DAOs, impact DAOs to exist, period. This is how early we are. And a lot of people that have been creating impact DAOs have used the documentation that I've written to help them architect their own DAOs. And I plan to continue to publish learnings about what worked and didn't work.
But impact DAO, that's not like a category that's imposed by the government, like you're a nonprofit or you're a profit. It's just a way of labeling yourself that indicates that you're, a civic organization. Yeah.
For sure, right? And a lot of the beautiful thing about Web3 is this willingness to, this excitement and self-awareness around the power of memes, memetics, right? And defining new ontologies like that are helpful for understanding the world and creating things that make a better world.
Wow. So maybe if there's a way you can distill, I mean, other than the way you just did, right? In other words, it's an opportunity to make the world a better place that's just emerging now. And it's got a lot of unique features that give it advantages over previous ways of organizing. Beyond that, is there anything else that you can cite that really excites you about this or that you feel is part of its large potential?
I would encourage people to look more into DAOs. I would encourage people to look more into this new meme of regenerative finance, which is all about aligning financial incentives with regenerating what matters, right? Namely, the planet to address climate change. That's a big idea. It requires a lot of really smart people to figure out how do you align incentives where you're actually making money helping the planet versus making money extracting from the planet. People way smarter than me, way more technical and financially savvy than me are working on this problem. And I'm grateful, but none of this would be possible without Web3, without blockchain technology. So it's a very exciting time. I think, the 1920s were the roaring 20s, and I don't think we need more roars. I think modernity is just full of roars, and what I think we need is a regenerative 20s. I think it's going to be a tumultuous 20s for sure. There's going to be a lot of civil strife and probably political violence, to be honest. But I think by the end of it, it'll be clear that the outcome was that this was a generative decade of like evolving our culture, evolving our technology to regenerate, building technologies that enable us to evolve our culture and regenerate our planet.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, that parallels in some ways some visionary thinking about the future of the environmental movement. Like the next great phase, it's not just protection, but it's restoration.
100%.
We're going to drain Lake Powell and restore Glen Canyon. That's going to be where a lot of the juice of people's involvement with the environmental movement will take place. And the idea of regenerating, of overcoming the negative externalities that have accompanied the rapid development of our civilization, it's a beautiful idea.
It is, and it's an idea that we can, if we work together, we can turn into reality. And another thing that I'm working on is I'm really trying to weave together all kinds of people, traditional climate people, integral thinkers like yourself, Gen Z builders, cultural leaders and like entertainer type people, community organizers, elected officials, like et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on, and we have to work together to evolve our culture, evolve our technology, et cetera. And it's going to be a really exciting decade because I think there's like this growing, raising consciousness of like, whoa, like the way that we've been doing things for ever since we've been alive really has just not really made sense. And it's time to work together to build a better way.
Excellent. Well, I'm 100% with you, and I look forward to following up on this and seeing where it might lead, and at least looking over your shoulder as you get into it more and develop it further and fulfill your role as a leader of this. I'm excited that we can have this conversation and look forward to more.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Gary. Great to be with you.